Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar today, Smartsheet Control Center Innovations featuring our new Blueprint Builder. My name is Jim O'Farrell, and I'd like to welcome you all to our session today. One thing I always like to do before we get started is just make sure that everyone can hear me and can see the screen okay. So can I just, using your Q&A panel on your GoToWebinar, can you just indicate that you are seeing and hearing? Yep. Thank you, Joanne. Appreciate the feedback, and others that are coming in now. Stacy and Cindy, great. Thank you all. Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here. Let's get right into it. I would like to share with you, first of all, just kind of run through some housekeeping, and then we'll do some introductions here. So first of all, on the housekeeping side of things, I want to remind everybody that today's recording will be sent out to you. And what we'll do is also keep a listing of all the questions that get asked. And the way that you ask questions, if you haven't done these GoToWebinars before, is that just by way of what you did in terms of responding to my question about quality, go ahead and ask your question there. And we have people here that are monitoring those questions as we're going here real time. These workshops are very much about you, our customers who are using Control Centers. So there is no such thing as a bad question. Ask any questions and all questions. And we have the experts here, and we can certainly help you out with those. We're going to do one poll later on, and we're going to have a survey at the end of the webinar or workshop here. And if you could just take a minute or two, I think there's like 2 questions on it. It should be pretty easy and quick for you to fill out. It provides us feedback and helps us make these better. Again, I talked about Q&A real time. Sometimes people listen to the workshops here, and they have a question about the Control Center application. Most of you are customers of ours, so just real quickly, Control Center is a premium add-on application. It is additive to your Smartsheet investment. So for those of you that might be new to Control Center, I just like to always preface it by that. And sometimes people say, well, where is it in my Smartsheet environment? So that's the general idea. So let's get going. Introductions. I have my colleague here with me, AJ Jindal. AJ, how you doing this morning?
Good, thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, great to have you here. AJ is our senior product manager on the Control Center side of things, and I'm on our product marketing side of the equation here for our solutions pillar solution set. So wonderful to have you all. By way of the agenda, very quickly, we're going to run through a quick update on the Control Center user interface. The primary reason we're gathered here today is to walk through the solution builder, and AJ is going to take us through that. And again, that's a real opportunity to see it in action and answer all of your questions. Finally, I'm going to take a few minutes and just point out some great new documentation. We've spent a lot of time recently building out our help articles and our documentation. I want to be able to share that with you. And of course, throughout, we have questions and answers. So I think without further ado, what we'll do is go ahead and get started here and talk a bit about something new. And that new thing is our Control Center user interface. So what we've done is we've made a significant investment in improving the simplification and the navigation and the actual usage of this environment. As you work with the Control Center UI, I want to point out that we have a new collapsible panel, a navigation panel on the left side, and you bring that up by clicking on this particular icon. We also have our help articles and so on links here. And of course, you notice overall a cleaner, more easy to use environment. One of the interesting items is we've now call what we used to call in the very beginning tiles, and then we've referred to it as project types. We now refer to these as blueprints. And so AJ, again, is going to be talking about our Blueprint Builder. That's all about creating blueprints and editing those blueprints. And we'll get into more of that in a moment. As far as other elements here that we've improved, the user experience here has been enhanced. We provide a lot more information and guidance in this intuitive progress panel. So over here on the right-hand side, you can kind of see what is going on, where you are in a given process, and throughout the whole Control Center experience, this is something that we found a lot of our clients have really appreciated. It makes it easy to navigate around the environment. AJ, I didn't have anything really else on the UI side of things. Do you think it's time to switch over? Or did you want to add
and then as I go through the builder, I'll highlight a few of the key things that came up in the UI as well.
Okay, great.
Sort of live.
Okay. So let's flip it over to you, AJ. I'm going to switch.
Before you switch, I got one slide after this actually, go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Switch.
Go ahead, switch.
Yeah.
Okay, you're going to come back to this one?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So bear with us. We're going to do a quick little switch here. I'm going to make AJ presenter, and you're underway there, AJ. And again, as we go along here, please feel free to ask your questions. And AJ, there's your screen.
Just get caught up here. Yeah, thanks all. So I'm going to go through the blueprint builder, and the first thing I want to do is show you this slide and just kind of use this as a summary. There's quite a lot of information in here. I don't expect you to read it all, but the main thing I want to point out are sort of like the fundamental components of a blueprint before we get started. So a blueprint, as Jim mentioned, is what we used to call tiles or project types. But we feel that the name blueprint encompasses a lot more of what you're building here, and that's where you configure all the rules, structure, and workflow that are going to determine how a new project is created and how all the projects are summarized for reporting. So this diagram right here, is a basic workflow of what an entire blueprint and control center solution looks like. And there's a few pieces that you're going to be creating in Smartsheet before you get to the blueprint builder. The first one is what we call the intake sheet, where you manage all the demand that's coming in for IT projects and approving them before you can actually create them. It's an optional component, but I'm going to walk through that in this demo anyway. The second piece is what we call the source folder, and these are all the sheets, reports, and dashboards that you want to have replicated every time you create a project. So you'll have a place where you say, okay, these are the standard versions that I want. Each of them will get replicated, and you're going to sort of, quote, fill in the blanks of some key information, and then it'll be available for your team members and collaborators to execute on and see the status of it. The third piece of this is the summary report. And every project that gets created will have key information about that project, whether it's like project name, sponsors, budget, but as well as real-time status information, KPIs or metrics. And they're all going to be linked into this IT portfolio summary sheet. And from there, you'll be able to drive executive level dashboards and collect other aggregate insights into your project. So all these three things are created ahead of time. They're all constructed and edited inside a Smartsheet. And then once you get into the blueprint builder, you're actually going to configure, again, all the rules, structure, and workflow of how all these components are going to fit together. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop over into the blueprint builder. The menu up here in the top left corner that Jim had pointed out opens and closes this left slide out panel. And one of the things we've highlighted in our new UI is the concept of programs. So what you're allowed to do is create multiple programs. And what a program is, it's a way to organize your blueprints together. So it's an organization of blueprints, projects, who the leads are, and who has permission to access them. And so as a customer, you have the option to buy blueprints and either put them all together into one program that everyone has access to, or split them up into multiple programs. So here's just a great example. Like you could have separate programs for your IT department, your facilities department, and your HR department. And the reason you might split them up is because the blueprints, the leads, and the users of each of these different departments probably don't need to have a lot of overlap, and you actually do want them separated. So that's what this menu is for programs and being able to switch between them. And this is available to both the leads as well as the users. Like any user could be a member of more than one program. So the example that I'm working here is a program that I've called Maze Corp. And once I switch to that program, when you first log in, you get to the list of projects, and then I click on Manage Programs, and here's where I can start editing the blueprints. For a lot of you folks, you've already got a program with some blueprints already set up, and most likely you're going to be editing them. You have a UI here to create a new blueprint from scratch if you've got those components. But what I'm going to do is walk through a blueprint that's already been created, so I don't have to spend a lot of time typing stuff in. So the approved IT project is a blueprint that I want to work on here. And as I'm working through this, I will kind of flip back and forth between the blueprint editor, builder, as well as what the create project UI looks like, so you can see how the two interact with each other. So over on the right here, you've got all the steps that you're going to go through so you can see where you are in the stages. So the first one's like really basic. You give the blueprint a name, you give it a description, and then there's the project storage. And the project storage has a few options here. The most basic one that I would recommend you start off with is a pre-selected workspace. What that means is that any project that gets created is going to go into one single pre-selected workspace. You have these other options here, but they're kind of more advanced. Like if you feel like having all the projects for a blueprint in one workspace isn't working for you, you can experiment with these other options.
AJ, we had an interesting question. Joanne asked, you stated, I don't want to do a lot of typing. Can we upload to Blueprint? So import information from various different systems into the Blueprint.
No, that's not the case. With the Blueprint, what you're doing is you're actually configuring how everything's going to work together. As far as uploading information from other systems, that would be more about the intake sheet. So back to the slide here, I'll just pop back here. This one right here, in a lot of cases when you want to pull information from other systems, you would pull them into this demand management sheet. It's a great question because this is a great place for the Salesforce connector that we have to pull information, basically upload information from Salesforce into your demand management, or what we call our intake sheet. And then from there, you can sort of use that information to create projects. And I'll talk a little bit about more when I get to that stage. Okay, so the next piece is the source template settings. So whenever you're creating a project, what it's going to do is effectively clone a folder that you've already created with all the templates, reports, dashboards, and sheets that you've got in there. And over here, I have selected the folder that I want to clone, and I've selected which of those I want to include as part of this dashboard. I've marked some of them to be required and some of them to be optional. There's also a way of grouping the optional templates. The grouping is basically like when you have optional templates and you want to group them together so that you have them, you can only pick one of a set. You can group them together. So where this comes into play is when I'm I've just switched over to the UI for creating a new project. So one of your users would go in, they would click on Approved Projects, and here's where the selection of the templates shows up. So here's the list of all the blueprints that I've shown as required, and here's all the optional templates. So now I've popped back to the Blueprint Builder, and here's all my templates selected. So the next step are the blueprint components. So these are both optional, the intake sheet and the blueprint summary sheet. The intake sheet is related to demand management, where you can have centralized control over what projects a user could create, as well as funneling information into it. And the blueprint summary is a way of collecting all the projects KPIs into one place, so then you can create aggregate metrics to generate executive dashboards. So all you have to do is just check them off to say that yes, you want them. Any questions there?
Well, there was. This is kind of semi-off topic, but
okay.
I had a couple of questions on it. The questions have been around blueprint. If you create a new blueprint, which we used to refer to as a project type, there's questions of would that be an additional blueprint license or a project type license? And the answer is yes to that, because each time you do create a new project type, the way we license Control Center is it's based on the blueprint / project type. Just think of one of those as the same. So we've had several questions on that, and I thought maybe the group in general might want to have the general response to that. Back to you, AJ.
Yep. And just to note that we allow you to create a few experimental blueprints without actually purchasing them. So whatever you purchase, you'll always have the ability to create one or two extra just to play around with.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah,
Okay.
just to play around with, and then we'll just sort of do a true up afterwards.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Okay.
Okay, so since I selected the intake sheet, there's a few options I need to set on that. So the first one here is actually what the sheet is there's a UI here for selecting the intake sheet. The next one is a project selection column, and this is a column in that intake sheet that will be my drop-down. That'll be the drop-down list for the user to choose what project they're going to create. So let me go to the Maze Corp. Here's again the UI here. So right here, there's a drop-down where I select the project. And so what populates this list here of projects is saying that in the actual intake sheet, it's the project name column. And if it would help, I'll just bring up the intake sheet here. Here's what an intake sheet looks like. And then right here in the project name column, this is where I have all the project names I'm going to select. So this right here, I'm in the Smartsheet application. Back to the Control Center Builder, quite often it's useful to have the Builder up on one tab and Smartsheet up in another, so you can refer back and forth to what it is you want to do. The next is the approval column. So the way demand management works is that project requests go into the intake sheet, and then there's generally a workflow where some kind of a program lead or somebody goes through and says, yep, these are the projects we're going to authorize to have created. And that's where you select which is the approval column. And only the items in the approval column where the value is set to yes. So these two, the approval column and the approval value, work together to determine which projects will show up in that drop-down list. So again, if I go back to my demand management sheet in Smartsheet, you see that these projects where the project approval column is set to yes, that's the green check mark, those are the only ones that are going to show up. And so anyone trying to create a project will only be able to create projects where the project approval column is set to yes. And so that's what the approval column and approval value are for. The next two here are the identified projects created and projects created value. What that is for is that once a project has been created using Control Center, we want to mark that it's been created and that it cannot be created again. So the column where I mark which one's been created is the project stage column. And the values that mark that it's been created and can't be done again are live and archived. So again, if I go back to my intake sheet, here's the project stage column, and any project that's marked as live or archive, which we don't have here, basically come off that list, so you can't create them again. Now, again, you can get clever with this. If you wanted to allow projects to be created more than once, you just leave the project's approval column blank. And if once a project is approved, you want it to allow to be created multiple times, you would just leave your identified project as created blank. The advanced options on the right here, you can hide them or display them. They're not required, but the first one is a project link column. What that does is once the project is created, it'll put a hyperlink into your intake sheet so that you could just click on it and jump to the project and open it directly. Good thing to have there. The intake attachments is that, what that means is that if on the demand management or intake sheet, you've attached items there like documents or something, once the project is created, it allows those attachments to be routed into the sheets that you've just created. I've just kind of left this blank here because I don't want to do it. Filter projects by user is a way to further filter the list of projects that are available to you by the currently logged in user. Again, not something that a lot of people would use. The main thing is that if you really want to restrict the project someone can create to only those projects that they're assigned to, you would use that column. But here's one that is useful, the additional filters. And I've put department in here. So let me show you what this does. Is if I go into the Control Center interface where I want to create a project. So again, I've switched over to the Create Project. Right now, if I click on just project name, you can see there's a large number of projects here. It actually could turn into an overwhelming list, but I have a filter up here called department. And if I want to see, I only want to see the filter, the projects for strategic planning, I can select the department as strategic planning, and now the list of projects is much shorter. I've only got 2 projects to select from instead of, you know, potentially 50 or 100.
AJ, we had an interesting question. Jen Ann asked a question here. Can you route attachments into the summary sheet where all projects link into?
You cannot.
Okay.
Yeah, route. So that comes. We'll do that later on when we get to the blueprint summary. But yeah, we don't have a feature where attachments get routed to the summary sheet, and it's mostly because the summary sheet's purpose is to provide KPIs that you can just quickly report on and then roll up to.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things you can do is in the summary provide a quick link back to your project. Thus, you can open your project and get access to the documents right there. And another thing, the reason we don't do it is because, you know, projects are dynamic. You know, possibly those attachments are being updated all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't want to have the attachments in 2 places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So once you've configured your intake sheet, so there's a lot of information there, but this is just configuring the intake sheet. And again, when we're building the blueprint, what we're doing is configuring a robust set of rules. So you only have to do this once with the blueprint, and then it's all set up for the users who are going to create projects. Okay, so let me go on to the next screen, and this is the profile data selection. This can be a bit of a complicated screen, but I do want to give an overview of why it's here and what it's actually doing for you. Profile data, and you know, we have an option. Profile data itself could be an entire webinar by itself. But what it's done here in the screen is it scanned all the sheets in your source folder as well as your intake sheet and said, okay, here are all the things that could potentially be profile data. The question that you're answering here by checking them off is saying which one of these things need to get filled in when you first create your project. Because when you create a project, you're kind of getting some blank not blank templates, but sort of generic templates, and you need to fill in some information to kind of get them started. And by going in here, you can check off the ones that you want to have filled in at the beginning. And where this shows up in the UI, and I'm going to flip over to the tab here for the Create Project. Down here where you have the global fields listed, the ones that I've checked off there are all the ones listed down here in the global field. And you can see that some of them are ones that, as a user, I'm going to fill them in when I create my project. And some are grayed out because they're going to get filled in automatically by pulling that information from the intake sheet. So you have the option of deciding that. That's on the next screen. But the first take is which ones do I want? So project name, project owner, department, primary KPI, kickoff, and project plan. So there are 6 fields here that I want to have filled in when I create my project. And back on the blueprint builder, those are the 6 that I've checked off here. As far as configuring the details of how they're going to get filled in, that's on the next screen. And you can see there's actually a lot of profile data that is present in my project that I don't need to have filled in right at the get-go. So I don't check them off here.
But you can go back later on.
Exactly.
And add that, add additional profiles.
Yep, great point, Jim. So one of the things about working with a blueprint is you can do all this work, maybe try creating a few test projects to make sure it's what you want. If it's not, you can always come back and edit your blueprint again and make these changes.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Okay, so on to the next page. This is the customized profile data. So again, I'm going to pop back to the Create Project screen, and notice how some of these are grayed out. Some of them are actual things that I can fill in. That's what I'm configuring, again, back in the Blueprint Builder on the customized profile data. At the simplest level, you have the field name, and you just simply specify what is the source of that data. And the data can either come from the intake sheet, and that's what the demand management, or it can be user entered. So you can see on project name, I said that's going to come from my demand management for IT project intake sheet, whereas project owner is actually coming, it's user entered. And the others are coming from the demand management sheet. Now, if I click on the show advanced, there are a lot more advanced options of how I want to configure them. So I can add some description text. I can see which sheets that profile data is present in. But let's talk about the contact list. When I do when I have data that's going to be manually entered by the user, there are several different data types I can select from. And with those data types, I can have different validation rules. So when it's a contact list, let me go over here, you'll see that I can type in, you know, and a name, and then what it's doing is it's pulling from the address book of my Smartsheet contacts, making it a lot easier for me to select the person I want to assign as a project owner. Plus, I can type in any email address I want. Also, on the advanced one, I have a target column. Typically, the profile data is added to the very first column next to the primary column. And this I'm getting a little bit, let me just pull up the, how are we doing for time here?
We're good.
Okay.
You're going to pull up a plan?
Yeah, I'm going to pull up one of the plans that I created.
So AJ is just going to show where the summary data actually ends up in a typical project plan. Yeah. So you can see actually where this gets mapped to it.
So the profile, so this is a sheet with all my profile data in it. So I've got the profile data summary up top. These are all the individual pieces of profile data. And what I've done is I've color coded them. So the ones that are in light blue, this is just something I've done when I created my sheet. But all the ones in light blue are the things that are going to be filled in right up front. And the ones that I've color coded in green are the ones that are internally generated for the summary roll up afterwards. So with the project owner, by default, all the profile data gets added into the column that's immediately to the right of the task name. But in the case of the project owner, because it's a contact list, I actually want it filled in on this assigned to column so that it is like a real assigned to, like it's a contact, assigned to column is a contact list here. I want it to actually get added to a contact list column. And so when I pop back to my blueprint builder, the target column here, I've told it I want it to go into the assigned to column on my sheet versus these ones that are blank, which means they'll just by default go into the column right next to the primary column. And same with these other ones, these ones that I'm bringing in from the IT projects, I can choose what target column they're going to come from. I can also choose what column out of the intake sheet they're going to come from. By default, the approved column is blank, which means it'll just look for a column with the same name called department. But if there's a different name that I want to pull from out of my intake sheet, I can select it from here. And whenever I do use something that comes from an intake sheet, the behavior here is I have an option to say, do I want it to be a cell link, meaning that it'll be cell linked from the intake sheet, or will it just be a one-time write, meaning that it's just copied over from the intake sheet. So and I know there's like a lot of information here on that. Any questions on?
No, I think people are reacting very positive. I'm getting good questions here. I'm taking them one off. There is a kind of a consistent question coming in. If I don't mind taking a minute and just answer, I'll take a stab at this, and you can color this one. Michael asked a good question. What's the benefit of having multiple blueprints? If each blueprint is an additional license cost, couldn't the same result be achieved with a single blueprint with optional templates to cover other processes? And that's a great question, and it does. Let me see if I can answer that succinctly. Michael, think of it, a blueprint as a program, if you will, something like maybe it's a store opening, or it's an employee onboarding, or it's IT PMO. So what we're thinking here of a blueprint, it scopes to that particular usage area, or that particular application, if you will. And so yes, you can have optional templates and all kinds of different elements that support that process in that given blueprint. But if you're going to do something completely different, like say you're going to do now facilities management, or you're going to do something like employee onboarding and HR.
Well, actually, I'll give you a better example. So let's just, the hypothetical example I'm going to give is an IT department.
Yeah.
And let's say they have hardware projects and software projects.
Yeah.
And yes, while you could do it as an optional template, if the fundamental structure of a hardware project is different from a software project, is different from, let's say, like a maintenance project. You know, you would create 3 different blueprints. And what it means is that when you create those projects, instead of having to make a lot of decisions around optional templates, you would just say, you know, I have a hardware project, I just run through it, and all the templates and structure I need for it are right there.
Yeah.
If there are just subtle differences in them, you're right. Optional templates are the way to do it. If you end up with things that are, you know, like fundamentally or structurally different, but they're still in the IT PMO program, you would use separate blueprints for them.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, it's a good question, Michael, and I think others are asking this question too. I think it warrants just having maybe a one-off conversation about your use case, and we can help with that conversation. Go ahead, we're doing well.
Okay, so so again, the intake settings page, sorry, the profile data selection and the customized profile data, both of these kind of run together. The first one is saying, let me identify what I need to fill in from the get-go. And the second page is, how do I actually want it to be filled in? What are all the rules around how it gets filled in? And all of that sort of maps to this screen from the user, from the users that are going to create projects. This will map to this screen for them. So let me go on to the next screen here. And now we're getting into the blueprint summary. So again, let me just pop up the slide here. So the blueprint summary is this page right here. And what's going to happen is every single project that gets created is going to have its KPIs, profile data linked to this page. So then you can generate executive level dashboards as well as do roll-ups. So for example, you know, if you wanted to just, like, for example, have a count of how many projects there are, or if you wanted to just count how many projects were at risk, or how many projects are in a particular department or region, or how many, you know, tasks are at risk across all those projects. You kind of need to have all that data in one place so you can implement Smartsheet formulas to generate all that data.
Almost like a data mart.
Yep.
Yeah.
So in the user interface, the blueprint summary, the first thing you do is you select what summary sheet you want to have. Now, keep in mind that any given blueprint can actually have multiple summary sheets. You're not restricted to just one. So you could have one summary sheet that could be more for just providing like an overall like start end date summary, and you could have another summary sheet that might be more oriented towards finance and budgets. They could be merged into one, they could be separate. Your use case will help you determine whether you want to do one or multiple. So the first step is you just pick out which summary sheet, you know, what is the physical sheet in Smartsheet that you want all the data to go to. And that's something you'll pick ahead of time. I'm just going to pop back into Smartsheet and show you what that summary sheet looks like in our case.
While you're doing that, another quick question. Mary asked a question. Will this GUI configuration method, which is the blueprint builder we're going through here, be applicable for those configuration files which were created prior to this GUI method being available?
Fantastic question. Yes, yeah, everything is backwards compatible. So the things that you created beforehand, you can use this user interface to update them. I will give you a caveat though. There were, in the old, so prior to us having a UI, you had to manually update a config sheet. It is possible that errors could have been introduced at that point. So if anything is not quite working right, definitely contact our support people if you're doing that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so here's an example of a summary sheet. It's quite busy, but you can see that there's a lot of information about the projects in here. But you know, the summary portfolio, that is the sheet I selected right here. Then the next step is you're selecting which of your sheets in your blueprint you're going to pull profile data from. Not every single sheet in your project may have data that you want to pull into your summary data. So you just check off the ones that have data in them, and you check one of them to be your primary. The primary one is kind of like the master, where if a piece of profile data exists in more than one spot, the primary is the one that always wins. And then on the summary data fields, what it's doing here is it's scanning all those sheets that you selected and saying, okay, here's all the profile data that I found. Which ones do you want to have actually put into, whoops, did we?
No, we're good.
Okay, which ones do you want to actually have linked into your profile sheet? And when you selected the profile sheet, any columns that it found that matched by name to your the profile data in your sheet, it automatically checks them off, and you'll actually notice you can't uncheck them either because they're kind of like hard-coded now. So if you decided that you actually don't want this on your summary sheet, you just go into your summary sheet and delete that column. If there's a new column that I want, like projected end date, whoops, or to, let's see what I got, like milestones pending, whoops, I can check it off, and when I update it, it'll actually create that column in my summary sheet. So that's what's going on here. And then right down, and then this last little bit here is the row hierarchy. So row hierarchy allows you to organize the projects that get added to the summary sheet into a hierarchy. So let me demonstrate what that looks like here. I'm going to collapse my summary sheet here. And so see I've got how all the application development projects, I have a row for them, and then underneath them I have the different, the primary measurement criteria. And then what it's doing is, like, as the projects come in, so these like EXP04 came in, it was in the application development department, and growth was its primary metric, it automatically sorted it and put it in the right hierarchy. The reason that's useful is that now under growth, I can put roll-up formulas, like this one right here. I just put the formula in there, count of children. So under application growth, I can count how many projects there are, and then for application development, I can sum the children. So it gives us the ability to do to use basically like the children formula in Smartsheet, yeah, to create roll-up metrics that are segmented by departments or other criteria. Otherwise, you'd have to just create summary metrics at the top for every single thing.
And you know what's really cool about this is that this summary report is essentially taking multiple sheets and merging those into a single row. So you essentially have kind of a normalized single row view of all of your data. So you've got so much flexibility here, don't you, to do all these different kinds of statistics.
Correct, correct. And so this is what we call like the portfolio view. So as a director or as a VP who says, like, you know what, I don't really need to get into the down and dirty details of every project, just kind of give me the headline. So I want to know what's my portfolio doing, and just give me a quick one-line summary of each project. So if I go into the, let's take a look at the, the executive dashboard here. I just want to know, okay, I've got 265 projects in my portfolio, 117 of them are live, the overall health is green, I got my total budget, here's some key metrics that I want, and again, these are metrics, even this, for example, how many projects do I have by department? I got a nice pie chart here, and then as I scroll down, whoops, I needed to fix that one up, but even here, what would go here is I could just have like a quick little report widget that would be like a one-line summary of every single project. Basically, like maybe the project name, its percent complete, its start and end date, and who the project owner, and that's it. But this is the key thing. To be able to generate a portfolio level overall view, you need to have this summary sheet, which is why we highly encourage all blueprints and programs to use it, even though it's an optional component. But that's, this is effectively where the real power of Control Center comes in, that once you can create all these projects at scale, now you can then report on them at scale as well. So anyway, that's what the report hierarchy is. And then right here, you've got an interface that if you do want a second summary sheet, you can easily add one. And then down here, we've got the intake summary. And this is much like the summary sheet. This allows you to cell link project data back into the intake sheet. Again, something you can just experiment with, because sometimes maybe you want something like, I don't know, percent complete back on the intake. So I know we got a time check here. I'm just going to go to the next page here. The next thing is naming. So what this does is that as these project folders get replicated, you kind of want to add a unique name to each one. And you can add a prefix or a suffix, and that way I just put the project name as a prefix to each one. So let me pop back into Smartsheet and show you that as the projects are created, you can see how the name of the project, like Server Farm Refresh IT Ops, is how the folder got renamed. And then under each sheet, I've put the name Server Farm Refresh in front of each name as well. And again, this just makes it unique so you don't have a ton of sheets all with identical names on them.
Consistency.
And then permissions and sharing is where you specify who gets to own the project. So you can either have projects owned by the primary lead and the project creator given a different permission level, or you can have the project owner, creator be the owner. And whenever the project creator is the owner, the lead automatically becomes, sorry, all the leads become admins on them. And then there are additional people that you can automatically share to the project. So for example, let's say there's like a stakeholder, like for example, let's say the director or a VP. You want them to be shared to every project, but they're not necessarily a lead. You can add their names here so that automatically they'll be shared to every one of these projects that are created. Now, one thing I want to point out is that there's a place in the UI here. I kind of just sort of, on customized profile data, anybody who is indicated as a contact early on at the beginning can be automatically shared to the project. So let me find that. Let me find it here. Where is it? Project name. Right here. So where we got the project owner, if I make the project owner a contact list, you'll see that there's a permission level here. And back here on the contact list, I can automatically set it so that whoever I designated as a project owner will also be automatically shared to the project. And that's done back here on the customized profile data sheet. Page. So here's where all the permissions and sharing are done. That's actually the last step of the builder. And then you click save, that'll update it all. And then in the UI here, this is where you let me just put, whoops. And then you can then test it by running through the UI to create a project. And by the way, this is where all the sharing shows up for the end user, and they can add additional people that they want to share to. But this means that all the sharing will be pre-populated based on what you did on the last page of your blueprint. So yeah, we're running up here at the end of the time.
That was great, AJ. Thank you. You want to go back to the slides? We'll just do it from yours. Yep. Thank you very much. And lots of good interaction, lots of good questions as we're going along here. So appreciate everybody's insights. Wanted to take 2 more minutes, and we've got some exciting information to share here. New help articles and documentation. So if we go to the next slide, there's a link here for you, and we're going to share this deck out with you. But you can see the link at the top of the slide there. What we have done is built out topics, help articles, and videos that provide you overviews of these various different subject matters: Control Center overview, accessing Control Center, orientating towards Control Center. A lot on global updates. That's a powerful capability that we want you to fully take advantage of. That's global search and replace.
We got a whole other webinar on that.
Yeah, we do have a whole, and we probably should do it again. We're getting a lot of questions on it. We have a full-on frequently asked questions section, and even understanding your role. A lot of the people on this particular workshop are the primary leads for Control Center in your organizations. So understanding that role and what's the role and responsibility. So do take some time, go to that link. We'll make sure that it gets sent out to you following this particular session today, and we'll go from there. Now, the next slide, let's see, what I'm going to try to do is we do have a poll. I'm going to take a second here and launch this poll, and let me know when you can see it on your screen. Looks like it's there right now, AJ. And we would just like to ask you very quickly if you could take a second and respond to the questionnaire for our next workshop. What we'd like to ask you is, what would you like to see in terms of the following topics, or what topics interest you the most? And by the way, as you're filling out this poll, if you could go ahead and also just note that our next workshop is slated for June 14th. So take a second here and just answer the question. And in the meantime, we had a couple questions in here. Cindy was asking a question, and I think it's a bit off topic because I think she's asking about importing budget data into a project. And in particular, she's working with Oracle project costing. Mm-hmm. So one of the items, and AJ, I'm sure you're going to add color on this too, Cindy, is that we have the ability, of course, with our open API environment to have like a bidirectional integration with Smartsheet in that environment. So we can extract data out of a project costing environment or some other element or table within the Oracle environment. Mapping that to the control center framework.
From the at project.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You would use, it's like what I said before. You'd use the API. You could map the data into the intake sheet. Yeah. And then the intake sheet is the one source of importing data. Yeah. And then from the intake sheet, as long as you identify them as profile data inside of your project, that's how you pull stuff in.
That's actually a pretty cool idea because that way, I see. Would you have that project costing information? You initiate the project, it goes with the project out. Then as you're mapping your updates and your actuals against it, it's going right against that costing column. Exactly. And it can be rolling up into the summary reports too.
Sure, and it can be live information. So if your Oracle data is being updated, you just continue to update your intake sheet. And you remember on the intake sheet, one of the options was cell link. What cell link is doing is saying like kind of the quote source of truth is on the intake sheet, meaning that if you change it on the intake sheet, it'll cell link, it'll change in the project as well.
Yeah. So Cindy, that actually turned out to be a not off topic. That was very much on topic. Mm-hmm. So as my dad used to always say, there's no such thing as a bad question or an off topic question. So I'm going to close out the response here. We're going to manage the polls, and I'll share the results here. And let's go ahead. Whoop. And did we lose that? Just a second here. Sorry. Let's close the poll, and then let's share the results. There we go. So, well, great news. So 2 topics of most interest are the IT PMO design and best practices, which, by the way, is actually the scheduled next workshop. But I think we may be in a position at that next workshop too to talk a little bit more about project archiving. We're going to have a little wait and see on that one. But again, good feedback. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go ahead and hide, and then if we can go back to the slides here. Let's see.
I think I'm sharing, right?
Okay, yeah, I think you are too. So let me just make sure that's closed. Yeah, let me go to the next one. Is that up on the screen there? Sorry,
I think this is the last one.
Okay, so I think that's it for today. We want to thank everybody for attending. It was a great session, very interactive session. We'll get back with all of your other questions. We did run up against the clock here. So thanks again for attending, and look forward to having you attend our next Control Center workshop. AJ, thanks for your time. Good job. And most importantly, thank everybody for carving time out today. And please do take a minute and complete the survey on your way out. Okay?
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Talk to you soon.